Good day, everyone. We are here on West Washington Street in Athens, GA. And here beside me is the historic Morton Theater, the house that Pink built, that's hosted thousands and thousands of great performances. And we are together today to celebrate so many performers of Athens who are being recognized as the inaugural class of the Athens Music Walk of Fame. So in just a few moments, we are going to see the first one of the plates that's been laid, celebrating Pylon. And so we offer great gratitude to Michael Lahusky, to Curtis Crow, to Vanessa Hay, and to the late Randy Bewley, who sadly joins so many artists who've passed from our midst, including Vic Chestnut, including members of Widespread Panic, Michael Hauser and Todd Nance, including Neil Patman. And we are grateful to them and other recipients, including the B-52s, Danger Mouse, Drive-By Truckers, the Elephant Six Recording Company, Hall Johnson, REM. All of these artists will be celebrated here on West Washington Street, on Lumpkin Street, and on West Clayton Street. And so now let's see the very first one of these. So the plaque to Pylon makes me think of all the elements of our lives that have been enriched by these artists and their work. They've stimulated our minds, they've touched our souls, and they've made our rear ends move. And we can't thank all of these artists enough, and we can't thank you enough for having supported them and supported this great community for so many years. In a very special community conversation today, we're going to be joined by two of these artists, Michael Stipe from REM and Patterson Hood from Drive-By Truckers. I hope you enjoy. Welcome, everyone. This is a special edition of Community Conversation with Athens Clarke County Mayor Kelly Girtz, and I am blessed and fortunate to be here today with my good friend Patterson Hood, who is joining us from across the land. Welcome, Patterson.
Hey, great to see you. Great to talk to you.
It's good to have you here. Just want to begin saying congratulations at being a member of the Drive-By Truckers, who are one of the inaugural class of the Athens Music Walk of Fame that is going to be installed the first 2 weeks of September in the sidewalk between the 40 Watt, the Morton Theater, and the Georgia Theater. So wow. You have arrived.
I almost teared up when I heard about it. I can't even begin to say how honored I feel about that. You know, when I moved to Athens in 1994, I didn't know a soul. I didn't know. I knew the one person I knew in town was my roommate who moved there with me, and he knew one person, and that's it. And you know, but the first couple of months I lived there, I made this cassette of I called it Murdering Oscar and Other Love Songs, of the songs that I wrote the first couple of months I lived there, recorded it on my boombox in my bedroom on Ruth Street, the house we were renting on Ruth Street. And whenever I would meet somebody, I would just give them my cassette. Oh, this is the music I do. And I'd give them my cassette of that record, of that cassette. And that was it. I mean, that was all I had. I didn't have a band. I didn't have anything, no gigs. And so, you know, in Athens, to say Athens was good to me would be the biggest understatement in the world. I kind of feel like my life really began, you know, a week after my 30th birthday when I moved to Athens.
That very much reflects what it was like for me. I felt like I grew into adulthood when I got to Athens. Yeah. I probably arrived a year and a half after you did. And of course, the Ruth Street of 1994 was not the Ruth Street of today. The sorority girls had yet to arrive up the hill there.
There were no sorority girls on Ruth Street when I was there. And, but I loved it. I loved that house. That was a special. I was only in that house about a little over a year, but that was a very special place and time for me. You know, I could walk downtown, and back then, Jittery Joe's, the original Jittery Joe's opened, you know, just up the street from 40 Watt about a month after I got there, maybe the month I got there, and they were open 24 hours back then. So I would walk to shows at the 40 Watt, and then when they closed, I'd go hang out at Jittery Joe's. I was a total night owl, and I'd hang out there till 4 a.m, hanging out with Deanna Mann, who was literally the first person I met here in town. And I think Jim Willingham was the second person I met in town. And I met both of them there, and and just started this new life, and it was so magical. I can't even, I still just get emotional thinking about that whole period of my life.
So, did you pick Athens out of a hat? Had Adam's House Cat ever played in Athens?
Nope. We couldn't get a gig there, and we never played in the state of Georgia, and so it was. I had literally been to Athens one time before I moved there, and that was about a month and a half before I moved there. I had a girlfriend who you might remember, Donna Jane, but we ended up married for a while. But I had a girlfriend, and she lived in she was staying with her parents in Stone Mountain, and so the original plan is I was going to move to Atlanta. And she and I and her friend Brandon, who is like a childhood friend of hers, were going to get a place together in Atlanta. And right as they were looking for a place there, Brandon got offered a job running a really terrible Cajun restaurant in Athens called Cafe Orleans. It didn't last long. It was in that old log cabin that I think burned down next to Loco's, just off Baxter. And he got offered a job, and they had 2 openings. And he called me. It's like I can get you that other opening. You want us to move to Athens? I was like, sure, why not? That's close to Atlanta. I'll go there for a little while, and then it'll be easier to move to Atlanta from there. And then once I got to Athens, there was never any more talk about Atlanta. I fell madly in love with it. But I had driven over. Yeah, Brandon and Donna Jane and I drove over one night in February, right before all that, to see Counting Crows opening for Cracker at the 40 Watt. And I'd never set foot in Athens before. I'd always heard about it, huge REM fan from early, and Pylon fan. I was a fan, widespread, a fan of all this different Athens music, but I'd never actually been there. And I just remember walking around that afternoon, just kind of like, God, this is the coolest town I've ever been to. And it's like a small town, and yet it's got all the cool stuff that I would move to a city for. And we didn't have tickets to the show. It was sold out. But so we just stood in the doorway at the 40 Watt. And then after a little while, the door guy, who I'm pretty sure was Craig Liskey in retrospect, realized that we were kind of cool. We were okay people. We weren't there. We weren't going to cause any trouble, and they just let us in. And so we saw the show. It was incredible. And the first time I ever went to the 40 Watt.
And just to hear you describe your fandom of Pylon and REM and Widespread, and thinking about the musical work that Craig did, one of the things that struck me when I arrived in Athens, I'm curious about your take, is that there was this small c Catholicism. Like everybody was into everybody else's stuff, whether you were a folk picker, you were into the freak out bands, or if you were a jam band person, you also really understood the E6 stuff that was going on. I mean, there didn't seem to be boundaries. And I thought that was so cool compared to these scenes that have their little mini scenes amidst them. There didn't seem to be any of that thing going on.
That's definitely one of the strengths of Athens scene, I think. And, my first gig was probably May or June of that year, maybe June. Played at Real Arrows, opening for this brand new band that had just moved to town called The Possibility. And
little would you know,
at first sight. Oh, I know. I mean, that
steal a couple members from that guy.
I was like, man, that's the greatest band. That's the greatest band ever. And just fell madly in love with them. And I remember Dave Moore, who I didn't know, got up and did a couple songs with them that night. And that whole thing just, I still think about those barbecue beef burritos at Friolaro's. And I guess Preston Beam was the guy who booked the show for me and was kind of managing it there. And
so you just played solo?
I played solo with my friend Brandon accompanying me on guitar. He's a pretty solid guitar player, and he was accompanying me for that. And then I played at Pepino's, which was a terrible gig. And because you're in the middle of the song, and all of a sudden, number 44, here's pepperoni, extra sauce, and on the loudspeakers. Terrible gig. And, just kept slugging away at it. And then about a year, is August of 95, I started working at the hi-hat. And that's when things really started accelerating for me. I had that job running sound, and all of a sudden I started just meeting all these musicians left and right. And, I met William Tonks and Barry Sell and Kelly Hogan.
I remember an incredible Kelly Hogan show in that space.
Oh my God! I probably ran sound for that. It was incredible. And those hot burrito nights every Tuesday night when they'd have special guests, and they would Ann Richmond Boston and Amy Pike and just all these amazing artists. And I was in heaven running sound. And then the Possibilities around that time asked me if I'd like to do a side project idea they had where basically they would be my backing band. And we called it the Lot Lizards, and we played the hi-hat a few times, and we played the Star Bar once, which was my first time ever playing the Star Bar. And then about the time that ended was when I was starting the Drive-By Truckers, and Matt, who's Matt Lane from the Possibilities, did double duty, and he played with both bands for a while until the Possibilities got too busy, and he kind of had to pick and choose. And of course, they were family. So and that's when Brad started playing with us. And God, that's so long ago, and yet when I talk about it, it feels like yesterday.
How'd you meet Brad?
Let's see, doing sound at the hi-hat. And he was playing, I think the first time I ever met him, he was doing a thing with Kevin Lane from the Possibilities and Philip McCardle, who was in the Starland Boys, and they were doing a Everly Brothers tribute where they would and they did it one time, just the two of them, and then they did it a second time at the hi-hat with the rhythm section, and Brad was the drummer. And I was like, oh, man, he's my kind of drummer. I love the way he plays. And I kept having, the Possibilities played pretty regularly. And so sometimes we'd have gigs, and Matt just wouldn't be available. And Brad did one with us, and he told me that night, it's like anytime, any place. You call me anytime, any place. And I think on one of our albums before he was in the band, it had him like as a thank you. It said, Brad Morgan, anytime, any place, And then around the time we finished making Pizza Deliverance, our second album, the Possibilities got an offer to tour backing up Jack Logan, and they were, of course, huge fans. We all were. And, that was a great opportunity for them. And so it became necessary for us just to find our permanent guy, and Brad was it. And,
Yeah, in the same way that people talk about like Mick and Keith and Charlie being sort of the irreducible core of the Stones, I always think, you, Cooley, and Brad are like the center of the earth of the Truckers. Even though he wasn't there at the beginning. Brad's been, he's been full time in the band for, over 21 years, and he played probably half the shows we played for at least a year or so before that. And of course, Jay's been with us now for, he's been with us since the beginning of 2008. And another former Possibility?
Former Possibility. They were already three by the time he started playing with us. But he's been with us for, 13 years now. And then our new guy's been with us 8 years now. So, we've kind of stabilized a lot now. But
I think everybody recognizes the strength of this lineup, just as such a solid and nimble group. It seems like you can throw anything at those guys.
Magical. So, and the personal dynamic is really, really strong. It's real good.
Yeah, I met Jay when he and I were both delivering pizza out of the Pizza Hut in 5 Points, and he was in that band Love Apple at the time. It was mid-'90s, and just thought, man, what a sweet guy, what a great individual, and like so many people, moved to Athens by the magnetism of the scene, with the whole band, like 5/8 had done before. You've written a lot about the South, and it's been a through line in your work. And I think what people have appreciated in your writing about this is that you write about all the layers and the threads of the South, the good, the bad, the ugly, sometimes all three at once.
Right.
Athens, has this unique artistic culture. I think a lot of people who've either come here for art school at the university, to attend college generally, or who've come for the artistic scene, have found their people here. But Athens is still in the South. When you think about sort of a mid-sized southern city, the Athens that is, how do you relate it to the rest of the South? Or maybe how do you distinguish it from some other pieces of the South?
I mean, Athens is the sweet spot to me for the South, period. Besides thinking it's I think it's the greatest city of its size anywhere probably on the planet, and certainly in the United States. And I've been to a lot of cities. I've been all over the country, and I've never seen a town that's got what Athens has so much of, in such a small package. And it's super special. And and it's the art scene, the progressiveness of it, just the community of it, and really kind of every level, every layer of it. And it's something really special. When I moved here, and I'd meet new people here and who had never been to Athens, and they would realize I was from the South. They go, "Oh, I bet it's all kinds of culture shock." And it's like, no, it's really not. It's like culture shock was when I moved from Alabama to Athens. That was culture shock. That was
there wasn't a Deanna Man in northern Alabama.
Not quite. I mean, my hometown has its share of really cool, quirky, wonderfully weird artistic people, for sure. Absolutely. But there's not a Deanna Man anywhere. And, but there wasn't a scene to attach all that to. They were just kind of floating around in the periphery, or you would kind of know them, but there wasn't there wasn't a scene. There was, my hometown has this infamous music history, but it was never based on a live music scene. It was based on, or it was a recording thing, which could only have happened in that moment in time when it did happen in the 60s and 70s. Now there's a little bit of a live scene, although there's no great venues or anything. And to have for your scene to really blossom, you need a 40 watt and you need a Caledonia. You need both of those things. You need those ingredients, those size venues, and, not any slur to the Georgia Theater, because that's a wonderful, wonderful venue and a great thing to have too. But a band, to make it, I guess the rooftop at the Georgia Theater kind of comes closer to filling the role I'm talking about, because that is a place for people who can't pull 1,000 people can play and it be a gig. And you've got to have those size gigs to nourish a scene and for it to blossom. And that's part of the potential tragedy of what's going on right now, is because the clubs that are going to be hit the hardest and are in the most danger are those Caledonia-sized rooms and in 40-watt-sized rooms. I mean, they are all endangered. And
they don't have Live Nation money behind them.
Right. And, and it's so that really terrifies me right now for the immediate future of where we're at right now. Because if they go under across the board, I mean, it's going to destroy a vast percentage of the music scene because there'll be nowhere to play.
I was thinking about comparative to any of the other places that I've lived, even for brief stretches, Austin, Texas, Minneapolis, Norfolk, where I grew up. Athens just has this cluster of places to play, all within walking distance. Even though there are great places in Minneapolis and great places in Norfolk and great places in Austin, you got to get in your car or take a ride share from spot to spot. I mean, what makes a festival like Athens work for me is that, like on my 2 feet, I can get around to a dozen or 15 stages within that many minutes.
Yeah, I love that. And I miss that living here. I mean, there's a lot I miss. I miss my friends. I miss all of y'all. I miss, I miss the Manhattan. I miss the 40-watt. I miss everything. And of course, I'd be missing that right now anyway. But I do. I seriously, I never underestimate just how special and how unique all those things are. And it's great, and funny because Portland's not a late night town, and I am, even as an old man with kids, I'm still kind of a late night guy. I like to, if I go out, I want to go out after the kids are in bed and go out and do something and go see a band at 10:30 at night. And at 10:30 at night, they are rolling up the sidewalks around here. It is not a late night town at all here. And that's been weird to get used to.
Yes. I think now compared to the mid 90s, Athens is less a late night town. You have fewer bands that go on at 12:30 than you had in 1996, more that are going on at 10:30. I think that might be the shift in the country.
It's 8 here. They go on at 8 here. I mean, it's like, sometimes
like
the headliner's on at 8. I mean, yeah, it is. And it's a different scene. It's a good scene. There's a lot of really great players and great bands here, and there's some great venues. There's particularly some really good smaller theater venues that get cool shows. That's kind of a theater that probably is the size of 40-watt, but it's actually a theater configuration. There's a lot of shows that I go to in places like that are cool. But
that's great.
It'd be like if the Morton did more rock shows, I guess, or type things. But
I've always thought of it as a great perspective sort of live music room. I saw Robin Hitchcock there once. That was a great show at the Morton. Yeah. And of course, every time I'm in that room, I think, I can't believe Louis Armstrong breathed the air in this space.
Wow.
It blows me away. So there were people who welcomed you when you came to town, said, hey, we would love to have you be part of our band or work with you, kind of brought you into the scene. Was there a point where you recognized you had turned the corner from being the new guy in town to being the person who was welcoming other younger musicians into the fold?
It happened so gradually. I don't know if it dawned on me until probably long after the fact. I mean, and also when the band, when we put out Pizza Deliverance, which was our second record, it came out in, I think, May of 99. We all quit our jobs and just hit the road. And for the next better part of decade, I was gone all the time. And I was gone, we were playing 200 to 250 shows a year for a while there. Then we started having kids, that kind of slowed down. So, by the time it kind of dawned on me that we were sort of, a pretty established band, we were also a little bit of a band of outsiders to a lot of people because we weren't as entrenched in the local part of the scene as so many bands were, because we were touring,
road dogs,
touring, yeah, total road dogs. And, which was important for what we felt like we had to do. And, it's real easy in Athens to get it's real easy in Athens to say, I don't really, why put myself through this? Why live out of a van and sleep on people's floors when I can just write songs, make records in my basement and play, 4 times a year in Athens, and maybe pick up an occasional gig somewhere else, and, find a job that isn't too crappy, and have a life, but I'm still get to be an artist, and I don't have to subject myself to that. But, I think because of everything that I'd gone through before I even moved here, because I'd been 10 years in failing bands. And so I think once we had a band that seemed like it had a potential to get a little momentum, I was kind of like a driven madman to see how far we could take it, and so that was it. So it always kind of was a little different thing with us like that. But it's and sometimes I've questioned it, because I'm like, God, I know people who are they have these fulfilled lives doing that, and they get to sleep in their own bed and be around more for their kids growing up. Although I'm around for my kids a lot growing up.
Yeah, you guys have changed your touring patterns a lot over the years. No longer those 8-week, 10-week stretches, it seems.
No, not at all. And by the time we started having kids, we were fortunate enough that the band was doing well enough to where we were able to. It took a long time, and it was definitely a process and a transition of doing that. But we were able to start working towards a more sustainable pace, and particularly the last decade and a half, we've been able to find a balance that works, where we're able to keep our families and pretty stable and pretty healthy, and still maintain our careers and our jobs.
Mm-hmm. So just a couple more questions, Patterson. Certainly one of the great areas of support that you've contributed to is support for Nucci's space here in Athens. Could you talk a little bit about what drew you to Nucci's mission?
Yes. Besides my own bouts with depression, which, has been, definitely part of my life, most of my life, there's, I've lost so many loved ones to suicide. And when I first heard what they were trying to do, I couldn't quite wrap my head around what it was they were trying to do, but I thought it was a noble idea, and I wanted to help in any way I could. And so, we did our first fundraiser for Nucci Space before they even opened the doors to the actual building. And I think it was the summer of 2000. And by 2001, had already kind of entrenched this, that we're going to, do this thing every year. And of course, 2001 was, when Southern Rock Opera came out, and our band's, things started growing by a faster rate. And, the first time we ever played Southern Rock Opera in its entirety in Athens was at Nucci Space, and when it was a brand new building. And
I remember seeing you do it at Tasty World really early on.
Yep, super early. And then not long after that, I started dating Rebecca, and who's been my wife now for over 16 years. But we started dating in the fall of 2001. And, her previous boyfriend of hers had committed suicide, and she was had become very close to Linda in that process, and Bob also in that process of her grieving and trying to, find some balance in her life and deal with all that she was going through. And so, that kind of joined in with the mission in my head too, because it was kind of an early thing that was a part of our beginnings of our relationship. I mean, I remember that time we played at Nucci's Space playing Southern Rock Opera. Rebecca was one of the people there, and she came and bought it from me, which I think she'll probably, you remember I paid for my copy.
That's great. And she would pay and pay and pay, right?
Yeah, it's like, you thought you paid. you hadn't begun to pay yet, darling. But Nucci's Space has been part of our life. We were on the board for, I don't know if it was 7 or 8 years. Rebecca was, she was the secretary, and then she was the vice president, and then she was the president of the board for, I want to say, like 3 years. And, we were extremely involved, and we're still involved. I'm not a member of the board anymore, and I'm not able to be hands-on on like a daily or monthly basis, but we still, it's still a big part of what we do every year for our homecoming. Mm-hmm. And then our fans, the Heathens, bless their hearts, they kind of adopted it and made it their own. And I think they kind of set this goal of basically showing us up and saying like, well, we're going to raise more money than the band does, and so it got to where we would raise this much, and then they would raise this much every year, and really, really beautiful. And
nothing makes me happier than being at your homecoming shows and talking to people about Nucci's. And usually I'll gravitate to people who I have not seen in the 40 Watt before, and there'll be somebody from San Francisco one year and Chicago the next, and the UK the one after that. It's just amazing. Yeah,
we're racking our brains trying to figure out, an alternate game plan for this coming February, because we don't know. I don't know what the immediate future is gonna hold as far as fitting, a bunch of people into a room yet, and safely. And so
vote November. Vote in November.
Yes, you better believe it. And so we're gonna, we're working on an alternate plan so that we can still have some kind of a homecoming, even if it's more of a filmed event and some kind of online fundraiser thing or something. But we want to still keep that going through all of this, even if it has to be adjusted for a year before we can come back full. I don't know yet. I'm trying to be optimistic, but I'm also trying to be realistic. And so we're already trying to give it a lot of thought as to what something like that would look like and what options would be to make it as special and as big an event as we can while keeping everybody safe.
Well, we look forward to the actual event when it can happen again.
Yes.
The virtual one, we're going to be very happy with to tide us over. So final thing, Patterson, if you had to choose a couple of moments that for you crystallize the beauty of the Athens musical experience, one from your vantage point as a performer and then one as an audience member, are there a couple that stick out, one from each perspective?
Oh man, God, I mean, so many, I saw REM play in a bowling alley once, and I did sound at the hi-hat the night that Brute played, which was Widespread Panic backing up Vic Chestnut. Mm-hmm. And I saw Widespread Panic with Vic Chestnut covering Olivia Newton-John's Have You Never Been Mellow? And it was the last song of the show, and Vic Chestnut was singing it. He was so fired up that I swear he was just levitating. I swear he was just like, it was as if he was just, it was levitating over the stage. It was a really special night, but there are so many. You know, the first time I ever saw Vic play at the 40 Watt was one of the most amazing nights of my life. Seeing Patti Smith at the 40 Watt, seeing Fugazi at the 40 Watt, and Flaming Lips on the Soft Bulletin tour at the 40 Watt, which I also was running monitors
Great
for.
show.
And God, it was so good. And you know, and of course, all the various homecomings for us, seeing the Glands at the Georgia Theater the night the theater reopened was absolutely, I'll start crying talking about it. You know, one of the most special rock show nights of my life. And we had played a couple of nights earlier in my hometown. The Truckers had played a festival in Florence, and so I got up the morning of, it was, I guess, August 1st, wasn't it? And drove back to Athens. And I know there was some talk of, you know, I guess the theater had to pass a final inspection before they could open that night. And there was some sweating as to whether everything was going to be okay. And I remember getting the phone call, and we were about an hour outside of Atlanta, and we got the call from, I guess Rick Poss called or something, you know, saying, you know, it's on. and so we drove in and parked the car, ran to the Manhattan, had a few drinks, and we're there, you know, to reopen the theater. And then about a week after that, the Truckers did a 2-night stand there as part of the grand opening with Centromatic. And that was a really, you know, that was probably one of my favorite on-stage experiences ever.
Yeah, the great Centromatic, who played at the theater on their very last tour, which was a great show as well. Well, Patterson, you talked a little bit about your work with Nucci's, and I just want to close letting you know, like I'm going to let everybody know who I'm having conversations with in the series, that you have to walk around holding in your heart that your creative contributions really feed our humanity and keep us stable. And it's especially important right now when so many people are challenged and struggling. Can't thank you enough for doing what you do. I was just listening to the recent record this weekend while I was walking around my yard with my beverage and thinking, I'm glad I'm on the planet when you are.
Man, well, thank you, and thanks for all you're doing. You know, it's like, God, that's, you know, I tell people here, it's like, you know, Athens, Georgia has the most progressive city government in the United States, period, you know, and it's just, it's incredible watching y'all and what all y'all are doing, and Mariah and everybody. And it's just amazing. And I'm so proud of y'all and what you're doing, and under these horrific conditions, what you've been trying to do, and, you know, stand up for our town, stand up for the well-being of our town. And I love that you've done that so eloquently and fearlessly. And if there's ever anything I can ever do for anybody there, you know, I'm all in, because Athens is still my home. It's my hometown. And, you know, I've loved living in the Northwest. I've loved living in a bigger city, and there's been some really special things that have, you know, happened to me that I've been able to do by being out here. And, but Athens is home. I mean, you know, more than my hometown, or more than where I grew up or anything. And you know, our bands will always be based in Athens. And so, you know, and my dream is to someday have me a place there and get to kind of divide my time better is the long-term dream. And we'll see. You know, right now there's no guarantee that we're going to survive all this.
We are going to make it. We are going to make
one
it.
Home. but we're doing our best, and we're hanging in there. And so thank you for all you're doing.
Well, my love to Rebecca and your family, and to you. Hang in there yourself. I look forward to seeing you soon.
All right. All right. Thank you. See you as soon as we can get home.
Looking forward to it. Thank you a ton, Michael, for spending some time with me this afternoon. I'm really excited to welcome you as part of the first class to the Athens Music Walk of Fame, along with Pylon and the B-52s and Neil Patman and Vic Chestnut and the Elephant Six Collective and so many other great local artists. We really appreciate all the work that you've given. I think especially right now, I know I'm so happy that the work that you've done exists and the work that other artists have done is in the world, because I think it's what a lot of people are hanging on to. So I appreciate that dearly. I want to begin, Michael, just asking you about your initial impressions of Athens. So I think you were still a teenager when you arrived, and I worked with folks in their late teens and early 20s for a long time. And I think about just what a wild time that is in human experience. You're figuring yourself out. You're figuring the world out. You're figuring out, what am I about? How do I project myself? How did all that fit into Athens? And what did you think of this small southern town when you landed here?
I was not delighted by Athens initially. I came from a much more urban area outside of East St. Louis, where I went to high school. My father retired from the military, and he and my mother moved to Athens because my uncle, my mother's brother, had gone to college here and was involved in the civil rights movement on campus. And Athens, being in Georgia, was close to where my grandparents, my surviving grandparents, were living and had retired. And so my mother and father wanted to be near them. So they floated, a carrot for us to come. And I said, no, I'm going to stay here. I was living with a punk rock band. This is 1978, I guess. I was living with a punk rock band in a place called Granite City, outside of East St. Louis. We had no money. We ate spaghetti with butter. We cut each other's hair. We all had terrible haircuts and made terrible music. But for me, it was this. I was living like the punk rock dream, or some idea of it. Right? I'd never been at that point to New York or Los Angeles or London, any of the centers of punk rock. And so when I ran out of money and became quite desperate, I came to Athens, and it just felt like a cow town. To me, it was really slow. I didn't know a single person here. The only thing I knew about it seemed very kind of granola hippie, beige, super slow, just nothing happening. And so I
remember the 70s being all beige.
Yeah. I mean, there was a restaurant downtown that I know Jim Herbert and a lot of people from the art school would eat at, and they were famous for every single item on the plate that they served for lunch being beige. Everything you could eat there was just beige. And so anyway, I was not very thrilled with Athens, and I wasn't thrilled with it for the first year or so that I lived here. But then, of course, I stumbled into the DeFi girls, which were Linda Hopper and Sandy Lee Phipps and Carol Levy, and a gang of kind of nascent, I guess might be the word, punk rockers, who were forging their own path. And I fell into that group of people and realized that there was a scene happening in Athens. That's around the time I first met Jeremy Ayers. And
rest in peace.
Yeah, God bless him, and his influence on all of us, myself certainly. But so I wasn't thrilled with Athens, but I actually, when I found that group of people, I felt like I had
your people.
Yeah, I had a community suddenly, and it was a community that I was younger than everyone pretty much, but I was happy to be the young punk rocker that that fell into that group. And that was, I guess, right around the time that the B-52s put out their first album, and Pylon were starting, and the Method Actors were starting, and maybe the Side Effects, I'm not sure. But it was an exciting moment. There were maybe 50 people in the whole scene at that point, but it was exciting.
Yeah, the scale is one of the things that has always struck me about Athens relative to other places that have become known as a scene. I mean, I think if you're in Haight-Ashbury in 1968, or if you're on the Bowery in 1978, if you take a 90-minute walk from either of those places, you're just in more urban fabric. I mean, from the Bowery, if I'm really hoofing it, maybe I get to Harlem or Brooklyn in 90 minutes. If you take a 90-minute walk straight in a line out of Athens up North Avenue and Nowhere Road, there are more cattle than people. Having been obviously in a lot of other scenes around the globe, how do you reflect now on the sort of tightness of the Athens artistic scene that was really emergent there in the late 70s and early 80s?
Well, the B-52s really laid the template for what Athens could become, and because there were no bars that any of us were comfortable going to. I was too young anyway, but because there were no bars, because there were no places to hang out, there were no restaurants that anyone could afford. There was nothing to do. There were house parties, and so people would gather at each other's houses and drink and flirt and pair off and go have sex and start bands and write songs and then break up and then continue writing songs or start a new band, and that's kind of the way it went. It became.
And the first REM gig was famously at one of those house parties.
Exactly. Yeah, it was a birthday party for Kathleen O'Brien, and at the old church there. What a dump that place was! My God, it's remarkable that it didn't fall on our heads.
So were people just like living in the auditorium space?
The front of the church had been divided up into an apartment. But if you crawled through a closet in one of the back bedrooms on the ground floor, I lived upstairs. Peter Buck lived across the hall from me. Bill Berry lived downstairs. You could go into Bill's room. You could go into his closet, get down on your hands and knees, and you could crawl through a hole, literally a hole in the side of the closet, and it would open up into the back of the church. And there was the remains of the pulpit and the stage where which was the front of the church.
But like a punk rock Lion, Witch, and Wardrobe.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it was nuts, and I don't know how many people that night came through that hole in that closet. A couple people. I know that at some point I had stilts, and you could get up through the window in the back of the church from the stilts, but most of those people crawled through that. It was a total fire trap. It was just unbelievable that, and apparently there were bodies buried underneath the floor. I mean, the whole thing was really pretty tawdry, but it was perfect for that moment. It was perfect for REM. It was perfect for our introduction to and everybody was supportive. Everybody became really excited that there was a new group to go kind of get excited about, and so there we were.
One of the things I've always loved about Athens' musical scene relative to some others is that so when I arrived in the mid-90s, came for graduate school, it didn't seem provincial here. It seemed like everybody was into everybody else's thing, whether somebody played folk music or somebody else did freak out stuff, or there was, the kind of widespread hippie jam band scene. It seemed like everybody wanted to listen to everybody else's stuff. And that always impressed me about Athens.
Yeah, there was always, I've found, anyway, having been based here for 40 years, I've found that people are incredibly supportive, not just of music, but of all the different mediums, all the ways that people create and throw it out into the community. Athens has always been very, very supportive of that. It also, I said earlier that the B-52s were the template. Well, they were for our generation, but there was a rich history in Athens as a university town of exactly the kind of thing that my uncle, as a college student, was involved in the civil rights movement. He then went on to become involved in Disability Act, which
mm-hmm.
the genesis for the national rollout of that was in Georgia, to my understanding. And so there was an activism, there was a rich hippie culture, there was a rich, I think, gay culture here that the B-52s kind of came through that, and culture of protest. And Athens is, as we all know, a bit of a liberal island in what the face of it, and I don't quite believe this, I never really have, but on the face of it is a somewhat not liberal state. I actually think a lot of people...
We're hoping to turn that.
Say what?
We're hoping to turn that.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of gerrymandering. It's actually the last substantive conversation I had with Bill Clinton. We were talking about gerrymandering in Georgia, and I said it's the worst in the nation, and it has been for decades. And he said, you're absolutely correct. And you're the first person who's not a political analyst to ever say that to me. But Georgia is insanely divided up and gerrymandered. And that's why it's been a red state for as long as it has.
Well, I think about this as somebody who taught Georgia history to eighth graders for a while. I mean, the way that you perceive time when you're 20 or 30 is differently than the way that, at 50, I perceive time. There's this sort of weird compression and sort of accordion style thing that happens. And, preparing for this conversation, it occurred to me that it was less than 10 years between the time that high schools integrated in Athens and the time REM began.
Wow.
And, and I wonder, for you to reflect on that time, were you conscious that even though we've got this very supportive scene, that, the broader outlying area, might not be queer friendly, distinctly isn't Black friendly?
I did not. That's an insane. I didn't realize that it was that close to my coming here, that the schools were integrated. That's wild. It's so funny because actually, we're going back to an earlier point that when I first met Jeremy Ayers, he was at the Dunkin' Donuts there at the corner of
Millage,
Prince Avenue and Millage, right? It was open 24 hours, so it was one of the places you could go if you were a night owl. So I worked at a really, really crappy steak restaurant. And my friends, I didn't have many friends at that point, but my friends were the guys that worked in the back kitchen. I was a cook up front, and they were both Black, and they were both bodybuilders actually, so they were really jacked. And we would go out and hang out after work. Well, I was flanked by these two insanely beautiful...
Michael's already got security, and he's still working in the steak restaurant.
They were boxers. They had these incredibly beautiful smiles and really like jacked bodies. And that's when Jeremy first saw me. That's what I look like. He was like, "Who are those people? I want to know them." And that's part of how I kind of integrated into the punk rock scene, as it were. Which, actually, to be completely honest and frank about it, was always quite white. Even here, it was predominantly young white people that were interested in that part of the music scene.
And it does seem it really has been maybe the last 10, 15 years that the local hip hop scene has become more fertile. World Famous, when we could gather in indoor spaces, World Famous was doing regular hip hop nights that were great. I would sometimes get out of a meeting here in City Hall and head over there to listen to what was happening. So much talent here right now. It's amazing.
It had to happen, and it had to happen here. I've always maintained that the musical form that followed punk rock, and punk rock became new wave and no wave and all the it became much more kind of mainstream. But the musical form that followed punk rock and had that same outsider. And really shockingly bringing things in from places that people did not recognize and did not know personally was, of course, rap and hip hop, mostly coming out of New York in the very beginning. But those were two scenes that were completely integrated and taking notes from each other through disco. I think disco was definitely a part of the bridge between punk and rap, and then of course hip hop.
Yeah, and I love thinking about those musicians that seem like they're at the crossroads, where they, equally had a disco element and then this sort of punk rock influence, Can, or those kind of krautrock groups.
I'm so excited about where all of that has come after these 40 years, these 30 or 40 years, to this post-hip-hop thing, which is really production-driven and really about sampling. But it has brought, through people like Q-Tip and Tribe Called Quest, has brought, who introduced Joni Mitchell to New York hip-hop. People are like, what? Excuse me? It's James Brown. And he's like, no. Check this out. Check out the Hissing of Summer Lawns.
Yeah, and a great record.
And so from a production perspective, we wind up now with Billie Eilish on the one hand and Beyonce on the other, production-wise, not that different. And definitely post, it's come out of punk rock. It came through rap into hip hop, and now we're in this kind of post hip hop pop thing that's truly, for me, exciting. And we're including Justin Bieber and Arca. If you want to be that disparate, and Childish Gambino. These are all coming from this place that really was brought together by in the 70s punk rock and in the 80s hip hop.
Yeah, I mean, for a guy who in the 80s worked in record stores, I have a little bit of sadness about just the sort of dissolution of the old school distribution network and the physicality of holding a record. But the flip side of that is that, like, anybody who can get a laptop can make a record at home. And so you've got Billie Eilish and her brother doing that.
And did you just say flip side?
There you go. There you go. Yes. No, I still remember stocking the 45s in the record bar. So,
well, that's where Elephant Six came to me. I was, they were a generation below me. I don't know the actual age difference, but I'm going to guess around 14 or 15 years. And watching them come up and watching what they were doing and watching how the different groups of people were all playing together and interlocking and forming these new alliances and new things, and sitting literally in their kitchen and watching them work. It was completely that Billie Eilish and her brother kind of thing that you're talking about. It was the ability to record onto a laptop, if not a laptop, a cassette player, a cassette recorder, a DAT machine, whatever it was at that moment. And that's where Elephant Six came out of. That's where Vic Chestnut came out of, and it provided Athens and then much later the world with this whole new way of looking at the legacy of Athens, Georgia, the legacy of the music and how that's passed down from generation to generation, how it's continued.
Michael, you mentioned Vic Chestnut, who's somebody whose songs I just have great affection for. I mean, really up until the last records he was doing with Guy from Fugazi and that crew. Could you talk a little bit about encountering his work for the first time and then working with him in the studio?
Yeah, it's so wild that he and Guy wound up working together because I knew all those guys. I knew Ian from Minor Threat back in the and the incredible scene that was coming up, the rap scene that was coming up in Washington, D.C., and then Minor Threat and Ian and Discord Records were kind of, and then the whole, what's it called, where you don't drink and you don't... straight edge. Yeah, the whole straight edge thing came through Ian, which is so crazy. But Ian, of course, went on to form Fugazi, and then we were friends. Crazy to me that, excuse me, through Jim Cohen, I think it was. I brought Jim to Athens for the first time. He met Benjamin Smoke from Opal Fox Quartet. He met Vic. And then brought and Jim had made films about both of those, both Vic and about Benjamin. And then who was Athens scene, but really had kind of a very much Atlanta scene, but had a very Athens kind of vibe to him and to everything that he ever worked with. So we can kind of claim him a little bit.
Yeah. I'm glad to.
Through Jim, Vic met Guy, and because Jim also made a film about Fugazi. So it was all coming through this filmmaker from Brooklyn who came to Athens as a fan of REM, and we started working together and became very, very dear friends. And then all this stuff came together. So yeah, Vic, I mean, when I first met him, I was astounded. There's no other word for it, by the level of songmanship. The lyrics that was pouring out of that kid were unbelievable. I still call him a kid. I think we're not that far apart in age, but he was really, he was such a bratty little pissant, and yet when he got on stage and opened his mouth and started playing, it was just mind blowing. And he was doing these, I want to say it was Thursday night at the 40 Watt Club. It's when it was there on Clayton Street.
The Clayton Street.
And what was the 1111 club that Rick the Printer owned, and it was the first place REM ever played out after the church, and it got shut down by the cops. And we're still looking for. They took photos. We're still trying to find the photos. I don't know that we ever will, but Vic came off stage, and I did walk up to him and I said, "We've got to get you in the studio before you kill yourself." And that's the first thing I ever said to him. And we went in the studio. We went into John Keane, and he recorded 21 songs in one night. And I ordered pizza. The extent of my producerial was ordering a pizza and keeping him going. And he recorded 21 songs that became Little. And then when the time came, I think I had taken a break from live performance. REM were on a bit of a hiatus in the early 90s. And I was spending a good bit of time in Athens. And that's when we made West of Rome, which later, Hal Wilner, the great, we've recently
sadly passed away.
It's 1730.
It's 1730. My computer's telling me. We recently lost Hal to COVID-19. He was the first death in my close circle of people to have been lost in this pandemic. But Hal is to me one of the greatest producers and musicologists, one of the greatest lovers of music I've ever met or encountered. And when Hal sat me down one night, some 15 or 20 years ago, and bought me a drink and said, "I want to tell you that West of Rome is the best produced album I've ever heard." And I was like, "You cannot." I was thrilled with the work that I was able to do with Vic and that record. I was thrilled to identify as being Athens-based and to be able to speak about to anyone who would listen to be able to speak about Vic and the work that he did as a singer-songwriter. To have Hal Wilner tell me that West of Rome was the best, he said it was the best produced record he'd ever heard. My God,
That's beautiful.
I think it remains the greatest compliment I've ever been paid in my life.
Well, and some have said that, producing is setting the scene. If you put somebody at ease, you set them up in a room, and it gives them the opportunity, it gives them the space. I mean, there's a lot to be said, I think, for that piece of music work.
I think I challenged Vic as a producer, and in doing so, allowed him to question some of his own, to trust his instinct, but to question some of the choices that he had made, whether lyrically or in terms of arrangement. And then the material for that record, I was a big proponent in helping to decide what songs would be featured on it. But my God, what an insane, immense talent. I mean, I really put Vic up there with Leonard Cohen and Dolly Parton and Jimmy. I think he's a brilliant and wildly underrated American songwriter.
I was always really shy if I encountered him, and kind of in awe of him. And the one conversation we ever had was in front of the Long John Silver's Captain D. Excuse me, I'm confusing my crappy fast food seafood on Prince Avenue, and his wheel, the rubber wheel on his chair, had come off the axle, and so he was sort of stuck, and so I stopped and I fixed his wheel and just said, hope you have a good night. And it was getting like close to dusk, so I was a little worried because he's there in the drive-through essentially. And I walked away just floating. I was like, oh my God, I just had a conversation with Vic Chestnut, as if it's a pinnacle experience.
He had that demeanor, he had that way of making people not want to approach him. And of course he was incredibly warm and insanely smart and such a wit, this incredible, dark and very dry sense of humor. But once you kind of cracked that shell, he was really a sweetheart.
I loved the variety of his stage demeanor. I think at the very last show I saw of his with that, Fugazi, or with the Guy and Canadian Guys group. He was howling like he was Robert Plant during some of those songs. Just so overt. And then there were other times if he would play solo or just with like really minimal accompaniment, it was almost like you were listening to somebody tell like dirty jokes on their front porch.
Yeah, he had that prankster element, like Andy Kaufman, another hero of mine, which from show to show you never knew what you were going to get. You're going to get absolute genius, or you're going to get this kind of rambling. He was really like pushing buttons and trying to prank people and trying to make them angry and trying to get them upset.
He was good at it seemed.
But by the time he was doing those shows with Guy, my God, there actually Jim Cohen made some films of some living room gigs that those guys did together. It's some of the best stuff that I've seen of Vic's work.
Yeah, I've got a recording of that last 40 Watt show of his that's just incredible. I'll send you a link to it. It's marvelous. I just want to ask a couple more questions, Michael. So, you mentioned the kind of the art influence and the visual influence on the Athens musical scene. That always has been striking to me as well. And you, of course, have done so much different work, internationally well known for the musical work. Been an art teacher, internationally exhibited now, a lot of great books of your work. Do you see a through line that you picked up early in your Athens experience that's carried on?
Absolutely. I think Athens, I know. Athens made it okay for one to become exactly who one is and to encourage not eccentricities, but to allow people to be who they are. And I certainly found that through, and again, back to Jeremy, but through Jeremy, through the B-52s, there was a beautiful, for me, my community before Athens and before finding the punk rock scene here was much queerer. And so to be able to find that here and to feel comfortable within that and to feel like, okay, I can be exactly who I am and not really worry about it so much, and actually allow that expression to come through the work that I'm doing, and in very subtle ways at times, but it was always there. And going back to that, I'd love to just shout out to the B-52s. I know there are several projects going on right now. I think a documentary film and a couple of books that I've had the pleasure to talk to and talk about the influence of the B-52s, because they have not gotten the due that they radically changed American music, and for the better. When they went to New York for the first time, no one had ever heard anything like that. No one had ever seen anything like that. It was actually radical, and it remains. If you look back, it remains absolutely radical. And the way that the music, the way that the music came together, the way that Ricky Wilson played guitar alone, that alone it's like Harry Part. It's like insane experimental Arvo Part level nutso, and it worked, and it completely, I think, blew a hole through what was fast becoming this kind of like, this is what you have to look like, this is what you have to sound like, this is what you have to talk like, this is how you present yourself. It had become this very kind of not interesting thing, and they just blew all this fresh these fresh ideas into it.
And I know even contemporary with their arrival in New York, Yoko Ono and John Lennon would speak about just how much they loved that record, and found it resonant.
Yeah.
Well, Michael, is there anything else you'd like to say to folks here in Athens as we celebrate 40 years of your work being out in the world?
I mean, I'm really thrilled that REM is in that canon of people that you named at the very beginning, and I'm very honored and humbled to be a part of that in any possible way. But I would say to Athens, and this is a particularly difficult time for everyone, I think, but the creativity here allowed me, the scene and the creativity allowed me to become, I think, the best version of myself that I could become, and allowed me also the space to grow within that, to make mistakes, to fall on my face, to do things my way. There it is.
And that's the best all of us can hope for, is to be constantly becoming that better version of ourselves.
I didn't become someone else's idea of what I should be. I became who I am, and then with the support of the band, we were able to take that to a larger and larger and larger and then much larger audience. And so it changed my life, certainly. And I don't think without the influence of Athens, without the support that I felt here very strongly throughout, I don't feel like I would have ever been allowed to become the person that I became. And I say that with no false humility. I like who I am. I like the influence I've had, but I owe a great deal of that to Athens, Georgia. And so thank you, and kudos, and continue.
Well, Athens loves you back. I can say that if not for your work and the scene that you were part of, I wouldn't be here. So thank you for all you've given, and best wishes on the road ahead.
Thank you.
Yeah, look forward to talking to you soon.
Yeah, great to see you, Mayor. Take care.
Yeah, good seeing you, Michael. Talk to you later. Bye-bye.
Welcome to the Athens Music Walk of Fame, B-52s, Danger Mouse, Drive-By Truckers, the Elephant Six Recording Company, Paul Johnson, Neil Patman, Pylon, REM, Vic Chestnut, and Widespread Panic. We hope you've enjoyed this community conversation. The rest of the plaques will be installed in the next 10 days. Please come down to Washington, Lumpkin, and Clayton Streets to view them. For full information about the program, visit accgov.com/public art. We look forward to seeing you at next month's community conversation.